Imagine walking into a softly lit room. You hear this quiet music playing, you see flowers arranged beautifully at the front, and you start to recognize the faces of your family and friends. So you walk up to the casket at the center of the room, you look inside, and you see yourself.
Wow.
Yeah, it's your own funeral. And you take a seat, and you wait for 4 people to speak. A family member, a friend, a coworker, and someone from your community.
Right.
What are they going to say about you? Like, not what you hope they say, but what would they actually say based on how you live today?
That is a deeply uncomfortable question.
It really is. But today, we are looking at why answering that exact question is, it's really the only way to actually take control of your Monday mornings.
Because it forces a hard stop.
Yeah.
I mean, we spend so much of our lives on autopilot. We wake up, we check our phones, we answer the urgent emails.
No, yeah, always the urgent ones.
Right. We put out whatever fire is burning brightest at work or at home, and then we just fall into bed exhausted. We're reacting to the world. We are being driven by our schedules rather than actually designing our character.
Exactly.
And if you are just reacting, you are never going to build a life that earns the eulogy you actually want.
Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are custom tailoring an exploration into the core philosophy behind Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Yes.
And to be clear right up front, we are not doing a standard book summary today. We are not really interested in a list of quick life hacks or morning routines.
Right. There's enough of those out there.
Exactly. We are looking at the underlying mechanisms of personal effectiveness. We really want to understand how shifting the very lens through which we view reality can compound over time to create a genuinely excellent life.
And to understand that, we have to recognize a fundamental shift that happened in how society views success. For the last several decades, our culture has been entirely obsessed with what the sources call the personality ethic.
The personality ethic?
Yeah. It's the realm of quick fixes. Public relations strategies, power posing, learning the right communication techniques to subtly manipulate a negotiation.
Right.
It essentially treats success like a social band-aid.
I was actually thinking about this when I was reading through the notes. The personality ethic is basically treating life the way we treated high school.
Oh, how so?
Well, you goof off all semester, right? And then you just pull an all-nighter to cram for the final exam. You learn the tricks, you pass the test, and you look successful on paper.
But you didn't actually learn anything.
Exactly. And Covey contrasts this with the character ethic. Things like deep integrity, humility, patience. And the analogy that really struck me was about the farm.
Farm analogy is great.
It's so interesting because you can cram for a test in a man-made system like school and get away with it, but you cannot cram on a farm.
No, nature doesn't work that way.
Right. You can't forget to plant in the spring, goof off all summer, and then frantically try to cram a harvest into the fall. It's a natural system. Nature just doesn't care about your public relations strategy.
It really doesn't. The law of the harvest is unforgiving, but it's also perfectly fair. I mean, you reap exactly what you sow. There are just no shortcuts in a natural system, and ultimately, human behavior is a natural system. If there is no foundational integrity, the inevitable stresses of life will cause your true motives to bleed through. People will sense the manipulation.
Yeah, they always do eventually.
Right. The quick fix communication techniques will eventually fail because they're built on a hollow foundation. Permanent trust requires permanent character.
So we have to start by looking at the soil, basically. We have to examine the actual map we're using to navigate our lives.
Yes, the paradigms.
Right. The sources talk a lot about paradigms. A paradigm is simply the lens through which we see the world. We tend to assume that the way we see things is the way they objectively are.
Which is a huge trap.
It is. Because if you are holding a map of Detroit and you were trying to find a coffee shop in Chicago, it doesn't matter how positive your attitude is.
No.
It doesn't matter how fast you walk or how much you optimize your route. Your fundamental reality is misaligned. You are going to be lost.
And trying to change your behavior in that scenario, walking faster, trying harder, it's just hacking at the leaves. If you want a quantum leap in your life, you have to strike at the root. You have to change your map, which brings us to the profound internal shift required by the first principle of effectiveness, being proactive.
Okay, I have to pause you there because proactive is one of those words that has been completely ruined by corporate jargon.
Oh, absolutely. It's on every resume.
Right. When someone says we need to be proactive on this account, they usually just mean, take some initiative or don't be lazy.
Yeah.
But the philosophical depth here is so much heavier than that. Being proactive is the realization that between any stimulus, like anything that happens to you, and your response, there is a
A
space.
space, right.
And in that space is your ultimate freedom to choose.
That space is the essence of human responsibility. And I mean that literally, like responsibility. The ability to choose your response.
Wow, responsibility. I love that.
Right. Most of us default to a reactive map. Reactive people build their emotional lives around the weaknesses of others or, the unpredictability of their environment.
Because they're just tossed around.
Exactly. If the weather is good, they feel good. If the weather's bad, it ruins their day. If someone insults them, they become defensive and angry. They are entirely a product of their conditions.
Let me think about that for a second, though. Let's test that in the real world. Because it is incredibly easy to blame a bad mood on the weather or even the social weather.
Social weather,
Yeah,
yeah.
like if my boss is a volatile tyrant or if the economy is crashing, my weather is legitimately stormy. The idea that a proactive person somehow carries their own weather with them, I mean, that is a massive burden.
It is.
It totally strips away the comforting illusion of victimhood and puts the entire burden of happiness squarely back onto our own shoulders.
It is a heavy burden, but it's also the only path to actual freedom. You basically separate everything in your life into two circles.
Okay.
The outer circle is your circle of concern. This holds everything you care about but have absolutely no control over, like national politics, the threat of war, or what your coworkers secretly think of you.
Stuff that keeps you up at night, basically.
Exactly. But the inner circle is your circle of influence. This holds only the things you can actually control.
Yeah.
Your attitude, your effort, your reactions.
Right.
Reactive people spend all their energy staring out at the circle of concern, just feeling helpless and victimized. Proactive people focus entirely on their circle of influence.
And focusing on that inner circle is what actually changes the map. There is this story in the sources that illustrates this instantaneous paradigm shift better than anything else.
Oh, the subway story.
Yes. So Covey is riding the subway in New York on a quiet Sunday morning. People are reading, resting. It's very peaceful. Suddenly, a man gets on the train with his children, and the kids are just completely out of control. They're yelling, throwing things, grabbing people's papers.
Just total chaos.
Total chaos. And the father just sits there with his eyes closed, doing absolutely nothing.
It is the ultimate test of the circle of influence.
Right.
Like, how do you respond to that stimulus?
Right. And Covey gets irritated. He's sitting there stewing, wondering how this guy can be so oblivious and irresponsible. Finally, he can't take it anymore.
He has to say something.
Yeah, he turns to the man and says, essentially, "Sir, your children are disturbing everyone. Can you please control them?"
And then what happens?
Well, the man lifts his head, looks around as if he's waking up from a dream, and softly says, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something about it. We just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. I don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either."
It's just crushing. And the profound thing about that moment is that the physical reality did not change at all.
Right. The kids were still loud.
The environment was still chaotic.
Yeah.
But Covey's map changed in a millisecond. The irritation vanished, replaced instantly by deep compassion and a desire to help.
Wow.
He didn't have to force himself to have a positive attitude or use some fake communication technique to manage his anger. His paradigm shifted, and his behavior just naturally followed.
That's incredible. So once you realize that you control your map, you have to decide what you are actually going to draw on it.
Exactly.
If you are claiming responsibility for your own weather, you need to know where you are steering the ship. And that requires beginning with the end in mind. It is this principle that all things are created twice.
Twice, yes.
First, there is a mental creation, and then there is a physical creation.
Because you wouldn't build a house without an architectural blueprint. You wouldn't just buy a bunch of wood and start hammering things together, hoping a kitchen magically appears. Yet that is exactly how most people approach their careers and their relationships.
They just start hammering.
They do. They let their scripts be written by their parents, their associates, or just the pressures of circumstance. They're hammering wood without a blueprint. Beginning with the end in mind, like that funeral visualization we started with, forces you to author that first mental creation.
I really want to look at the tension between leadership and management here because the sources draw a very sharp distinction.
Oh, this is crucial.
Right, because management is a bottom line focus. It asks, how can I accomplish this task as efficiently as possible? But leadership deals with the top line. It asks, What are the things I even want to accomplish in the first place?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, management is efficiently climbing the ladder of success. But leadership is determining if the ladder is leaning against the right wall. Because so many people spend their entire lives optimizing their productivity, working 80-hour weeks, missing dinner with their kids, only to reach the top of the ladder and realize it was leaning against the wrong wall.
That's tragic.
It is.
Yeah.
They succeeded at the wrong things.
Yeah.
So taking control of that first creation is an act of personal leadership.
Okay, so let's say I have done the hard work. I have shifted my paradigm, I am carrying my own weather, and I have a clear mental blueprint of the character I want to build.
Okay, sounds good so far.
But then Monday morning hits. My inbox has 400 unread emails, my boss needs a report by noon, and the dog threw up on the rug.
The physical reality.
Exactly. How does this beautiful philosophical blueprint survive contact with reality? How do we execute this day to day without getting completely overwhelmed?
Well, you move from the mental creation to the physical creation. This is where personal management kicks in, specifically the principle of putting first things first.
Putting first things first.
Yeah. The sources frame this through a time management matrix that categorizes everything we do by two metrics: urgency and importance.
Okay.
Urgent things act on us. A ringing phone is urgent. A deadline is urgent. They demand immediate attention. Important things, on the other hand, contribute to our overall mission and values.
The trap, though, is that most people spend their entire lives putting out fires in quadrant 4, which is things that are both urgent and important. Or worse, they spend their time in quadrant 4 dealing with things that are urgent but completely unimportant, like meaningless meetings, interruptions, responding to other people's manufactured crises. We basically become addicted to the rush of putting out fires.
We do, because it makes us feel productive in the moment.
Yeah.
It feels good to check things off a list. But the true secret to effectiveness lies in quadrant 2.
Quadrant 2.
Yes. These are activities that are important, but not urgent. Long-term planning, building deep relationships, exercising, writing a personal mission statement, preventative maintenance.
But because they aren't urgent.
Because these things are not screaming in your face, they are incredibly easy to ignore. But quadrant 2 is the only place where true growth happens.
The friction here is intense, though. Like every time I block out an hour for long-term strategic planning, some immediate crisis pops up and steals that hour.
Always.
It feels almost irresponsible to ignore the ringing phone, to focus on something that isn't due for a month.
It feels that way until you understand the balance between production and production capability. What the sources call the P/PC balance.
P/PC.
Right. Think of Aesop's fable of the goose and the golden egg. You know the one.
Yeah, the farmer with the golden eggs.
Exactly. The farmer gets rich because his goose lays a golden egg every day. Yeah. But it gets greedy, he wants all the gold at once, so he kills the goose and finds nothing inside.
Right.
The golden eggs are your production, the results you want. The goose is your production capability, the asset that actually produces the results, and that asset is you.
Ah, I see. So if you are constantly living in quadrant way, managing crises and ignoring your health and your relationships, you are pushing the goose to lay more and more eggs until it just collapses.
Exactly. Spending time in quadrant 2 is how you feed the goose.
Wow, feed the goose.
Yeah, and feeding the goose is what gives you the internal stability to step outside of yourself and interact effectively with others. Because up until this point, we've only talked about independence, managing yourself.
Right, all internal stuff.
But true effectiveness requires interdependence. It requires working with other people, which brings us to the principle of thinking win-win.
Okay, I have a massive problem with the term win-win.
Tell me why.
Well, in the corporate world, it is almost always used as a manipulative buzzword. Or people think win-win just means being a nice guy, accommodating everyone, and eventually getting stepped on.
Right, being a doormat.
Exactly. Plus, in the real world, scarcity is a mathematical reality. Like, if two executives are vying for one vice president role, they can't both get it. So how does win-win survive contact with actual, literal scarcity?
That is a great question. It requires dismantling the paradigm of the scarcity mentality.
Okay.
The scarcity mentality is the deeply held zero-sum belief that there is only one pie out there. If you get a big piece, it inherently means I get a smaller piece.
Which feels true a lot of the time.
It does. But when you operate from that map, life is a competitive arena. You might use win-win rhetoric, but your underlying mechanism is win-lose. True win-win requires an abundance mentality. the paradigm that there's plenty out there for everybody.
But what about the single vice president role? There's only one share.
In a specific, isolated transaction, sure, someone gets the job and someone doesn't. But a win-win paradigm looks beyond the single transaction to the overarching relationship and the broader ecosystem.
So it's a longer game.
Exactly. If I don't get the role, an abundance mentality says my career isn't over. There are other roles, other companies, or other ways to create value together. What's fascinating here is that you cannot approach a relationship with a win-win mindset if you are constantly in a state of urgent crisis.
Oh, that makes sense.
Cultivating an abundance mentality is inherently a quadrant 2 activity. It takes time, patience, and a really high emotional bank account.
I've noticed that when people talk about win-win, they really do often just mean being a nice guy. But Covey says true win-win is actually twice as tough as win-lose because it requires a balance of intense courage to state your needs and depth consideration for the other person's needs.
Yes, let's break that down because that matrix is fascinating.
Let's do it.
So if you have high courage but low consideration for others, you are operating in win-lose. You are a bulldozer. You get your way at the expense of others.
Okay.
If you have high consideration but low courage to speak your own truth, you are in lose-win. You are a doormat. Neither is sustainable because both eventually destroy the trust in the relationship. They kill the goose.
Right.
Win-win means you have the profound courage to state exactly what you need, coupled with a deep, empathetic consideration for what the other person needs.
But what if you clash? What if you truly cannot find a solution that satisfies both parties?
Then you utilize the ultimate safety valve. Win-win or no deal.
No deal.
You agree to disagree agreeably. You say, if we can't find a solution that genuinely works for both of us, we just won't do the deal.
Yeah.
It completely removes the pressure to manipulate, coerce, or compromise your values.
That is incredibly liberating. But to actually achieve that delicate balance of win-win, to really find it, we have to actually understand what the other person considers a win.
Yes.
You have to see the world through their map, which brings us to the most difficult interpersonal leaps of all. Seeking first to understand, then to be understood.
And we are remarkably bad at this.
Oh, terrible at it.
The sources use a brilliant analogy for this. Imagine going to the optometrist because your vision is blurry. The doctor barely listens to your symptoms, takes off his own glasses and hands them to you.
Okay.
He says, here, put these on. I've worn them for 10 years and they work great for me. You put them on and obviously everything is much worse.
That's ridiculous. And if you complain that you still can't see, the doctor calls you ungrateful. It is an absurd scenario in medicine, but we do this in our conversations every single day.
We really do. We listen autobiographically. We filter everything someone says through our own life experiences. We're not actually listening. We're just waiting for our turn to speak.
Yeah.
Or we are evaluating, probing, advising, and interpreting based entirely on our own map. We are prescribing our own glasses for someone else's vision problem before we have even attempted to diagnose what is actually wrong.
I catch myself doing this all the time. It is the let me project my home movie onto your life trap.
Oh, yes.
Like someone shares a problem, maybe a friend will come to me and say, I'm really struggling with my teenage son. And instead of exploring that, my immediate reflex is to say, oh man, I know exactly how you feel. The same thing happened to me.
Right.
When my son was that age, he did the exact same thing and here's how I fixed it. I think I'm building a connection, you know? I think I'm being empathetic. But really, I'm just shutting them down and making it about me.
Empathic listening is the exact opposite of that. It is listening with a genuine intent to fully understand the other person's emotional and intellectual framework. You are diagnosing before prescribing. You're not just hearing the words. You are listening for the feeling and the meaning behind the words. When you do that genuinely, without trying to fix them or judge them, you give that person psychological air.
Psychological air.
Yeah. Once they feel understood, they can finally breathe, their defenses drop, and only then can you actually get to the soft inner core of the problem and work on a solution together.
And when you reach that level of mutual understanding, you unlock the principle of synergy. Synergy is creative cooperation. It is the realization that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. 1 + 1 does not have to equal 2. It can equal 3 or 16 or 1,000.
But we have to distinguish synergy from compromise. In a compromise, 1 + 1 = 1.5. Both people give up a little bit of what they want, and you settle for a mediocre middle ground where neither party is truly thrilled. Synergy is finding a third alternative that is objectively better than what either person originally proposed.
The friction here, though, is that achieving synergy requires incredible humility. You have to admit that your map of reality is incomplete. You have to genuinely value the differences in how people see the world.
This raises an important question about unity. Sameness is not oneness. If two people in a room have the exact same opinion on everything, one of them is unnecessary.
That's a great point.
Synergy requires us to have the humility to realize our own perceptual limitations. If you see a problem completely differently than I do, a synergistic mindset doesn't view that as a threat. It views it as an asset. He says, good, you see it differently. Help me see what you see, because together we can build a more accurate map.
The sources give a great example of this. A husband wants to use his vacation time to take the family fishing in the woods. The wife wants to use the vacation to visit her ailing mother who lives in another state. If they fight for their own way, they end up in win-lose. If they compromise, maybe they do a frantic, rushed version of both and everyone is miserable.
Which happens a lot.
It does. But if they seek first to understand the deep underlying needs, like the husband's need for family bonding in nature, the wife's need to care for her mother, they might find a third alternative.
Like what?
Maybe they rent a cabin in the woods near the mother's house. They get the outdoor experience, the kids get to see their grandmother, and the solution is better than either original idea.
That's true synergy. But you cannot sustain the energy required for empathic listening and synergy if your own instrument is broken. None of these principles work if you are running on empty. This is why the final principle, sharpening the saw, is the engine that drives everything else.
Right. Sharpening the saw is the habit of continuous renewal. It is taking that critical quadrant 2 habit time every single day to renew yourself in 4 dimensions. Physical, spiritual, mental, and social/emotional. It is the ultimate daily private victory.
Just imagine a woodcutter furiously trying to cut down a tree with a dull saw.
Yeah.
He is sweating, he's exhausting himself, making absolutely no progress.
Okay.
You ask him, why don't you stop and sharpen the saw? And he says, I don't have time to sharpen the saw, I'm too busy sawing.
That's so real, though.
That is exactly how most of us live. We think taking time to exercise, to read deeply, to meditate, or to genuinely connect with loved ones is a luxury we just can't afford. But it is the very thing that makes the cutting possible.
And the brilliant thing about these 4 dimensions is that they are deeply interconnected. When you sharpen the saw on one area, it creates positive synergy in the others. When you push through a difficult physical workout, your mental resilience increases. When you spend time clarifying your spiritual values, your emotional capacity to handle a difficult coworker expands. You are the goose. You have to fiercely protect and nurture your own production capability.
So if we zoom out and look at the architecture of everything we've discussed today, we see that these principles are not just a random assortment of good ideas. They form a deliberate, sequential, upward spiral.
Right, how all of these individual habits loop back together to create an entirely different trajectory for our lives. They map out the journey of human maturity.
Exactly.
We all start life in a state of absolute dependence. We rely on others for everything, and if things go wrong, we blame our circumstances. The first 3 habits, taking proactive responsibility, authoring your own mental blueprint, and managing your time around important values, move us from dependence to independence. We claim our own weather.
But independence is not the ultimate goal. The pinnacle of human effectiveness is interdependence.
Interdependence.
It is the realization that while I am strong on my own, I am infinitely more powerful, creative, and joyful when I combine my strengths with yours. The habits of win-win, empathic listening, and synergy allow us to achieve those public victories. It is a continuous loop of learning, committing, and doing on increasingly higher planes of existence.
And it ultimately comes back to where we started. True peace of mind doesn't come from a life hack or psyching yourself up in the mirror or adopting a superficial personality ethic to get through the day.
No, it doesn't.
It comes from aligning your life with unchanging, natural principles. It comes from making sure the map you are holding actually reflects the true territory of human experience.
Because we all use maps to navigate our choices every single minute of the day.
Which leaves us with one final thought to explore on your own. If the map is not the territory, and we all rely on mental maps to navigate our daily choices, whose map have you been following your whole life? Did you carefully and consciously draw it yourself? Or did you just let your circumstances draw it for you?